We are starting a new series today, and I borrowed the ideas for some of this and the video from Craig Rochelle at Life Church, where they're a partner church in our denomination, friends of ours, and he is friends with Dave Ramsey and built a lot of the ideas on that. But I want to kind of take you a little bit even beyond that. But this series is really about how to become a master of your money rather than having it master you. And I think, when Jesus said, He said, no one can serve two masters. Either he's going to hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You can't serve God and money. He wasn't saying that, you can't have money, that you can't, work for money, that you can't get money. But the problem is when money has you, or when you work for it, when it owns you, when you are a servant of it, it's a problem. Money's a great servant. It's a terrible master. But it desires to master us in a lot of ways. If you think about this question of who's your master, who do you consult when you make decisions? Is it God that's directing all of your decisions, or is it whether you can afford it or not? Or whether it gets you more money or not? If you had a job that was offered to you that paid you twice as much money, do you take it? Would you consult God, or would the money itself be your master telling you what to do? And I think a lot of us get in the position that money actually rules our life. It tells us what we can do, what we can't do. I've heard people say it even when we're doing this campaign to try to build a building, and they say, I want to give, but I don't have the money, or I can't. So what I want to do is help people, all of us, myself included, to be able to get free from being a slave to money so that we can be its master rather than its servant. And Jesus actually talks a lot about it. It's one of the most things that he talks about in the Bible. And he has some very practical things. So this series is going to be very practical. And if you go back to the main slide, it's going to have 4 parts. The first is less is more. We're going to talk about that today. Everybody say less is more. Less is more. The second part we're going to talk about next week is stress is bad. Yeah, would anybody agree? I mean, it's almost obvious. Duh, of course stress is bad. Well, we're going to talk about the stress sometimes that finances create in our life and how to get away from that. And then giving is good. Everybody say giving is good. Yeah, giving is good. We want to do it. We love to do it. We're creating the image of a generous God, and we love to give. And so how can we free up so we don't have our money committed to things that we don't want it to go to so that we can give? And then tomorrow matters. Everybody say tomorrow matters. Yeah, the future matters, and how we plan for it makes a difference. And so we're going to talk about this over the next several weeks. But today, I want to start with this idea that less is more. And so I brought my box. You know what's in this box? No. Whatever it is, it must be really valuable because I've moved with it 8 times. And it still occupies space in my house. But I'm probably not alone. I'm probably not the only hoarder, pack rat that keeps things that I don't really need. Most of you probably are too. You might have a garage or a storage unit that looks like this. Anybody got that, right? We've got one. We've got a garage that's pretty much just looks like that, and then Tracy cleans it out and makes it all organized, and then within a week it's back to looking like that. So Tracy cleans it out and organizes it again. It's awesome that she likes to do that sort of thing. But storage is actually a storage is a $22 billion industry in our country. Because people need room to put their stuff. Because we don't have enough room at home to put our stuff, even though our homes now are 3 times larger than they were 50 years ago. 3 times larger, and we have smaller families, but we got so much stuff that we can't fit it in our home, so we need to rent a storage unit to put it in. That's what's called your stuff having you more than you having your stuff. And it's a problem. Because our stuff is not just neutral. It actually pulls on our heart. Like when Jesus said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be. Your heart is with your stuff in some ways. Like if you learned that your storage unit burned down and all your stuff was gone, you might celebrate because you didn't need that stuff anyway. But you also might like be worried about it. See, when we have stuff, we need to protect our stuff. We need to get alarms to keep our stuff safe. We need to insure our stuff. So stuff actually creates stress, and it creates it creates all kinds of problems. There's I've been reading a lot about St. Francis of Assisi, and you might know him as like the bird bath guy. Like he's like this, has this funny haircut, usually has a bird bath. He talks to animals. You know, big Catholic saint. A lot of people know about him. But what you might not know is his story. Like he was he grew up in a wealthy merchant family in Assisi, Italy. And during the days of the Crusades, like in the Middle Ages, like in about 1200, and he wanted to be a knight. And so he went off to battle with his armor and his horse and his lance and, you know, kind of all that typical knight stuff. Went off to battle to fight in a battle because he wanted to win glory and be a knight. And he saw his friends be killed. He actually got defeated in the battle and ended up being a political prisoner for about a year. Was in a jail. And during that time, he started really rethinking his life. Like, what is it about? Is this what my life is about? It's like just seeking glory and trying to get stuff. And he came back really challenged by that and began to kind of see that, you know, what actually causes these wars that they were fighting is trying to get other people's stuff or trying to protect your own stuff. And they were fighting over property and land and all this, and he got kind of disgusted with the whole thing. And so he started talking to his dad about it, and his dad had money, and so he was conservative, because when you got something to conserve, you're a little more conservative. And so his dad was like, no, you can't do that. And Francis had sold all of his armor and sold his horse. His dad got kind of mad about that. But then they just had all this tension in the family, and Francis was trying to figure out what to do, like with his life, and he's asking God, and he went to this chapel at Damiano, and he prayed, and he's saying, God, what should I do with my life? And Jesus speaks to him from the cross, and he says, rebuild my church. Can't you see it's in ruins? And so Francis gets up to go rebuild the church. He actually took it very literally. That church at San Damiano was like kind of run down. And so he wanted to get money for it, and he's like, where am I going to get money? I guess I'll take some of my dad's horse and some of his cloth, because his dad was a cloth merchant, imported, you know, clothes and cloth from France and sold it in Italy. And so he took his dad's stuff, sold it, and he was going to, you know, rebuild the church. But his dad found out, and he wasn't happy, as you might imagine. And so his dad dragged him before the council of the city and brought him up before the magistrate and everything and said, this my son stole from me. And Francis gave him back the money. He said, okay, here's all the money that I got. Sorry, I stole from you. And he's like, but what are you going to do? You can't do this anymore. And so Francis, he strips down. He takes off all of his clothes, butt naked, in the middle of the town square, throws all his clothes at his dad's feet, and he says, up until now I've called you my father, but from now on I have no father but my Father in heaven, and I'll trust him to provide for all of my needs. And Francis, doing this radical thing, all of a sudden he started going around as just like this barefoot. He didn't go around naked. Somebody like threw a coat on him or something like that, and so he had like an old beggar's cloak. But he decided he's not going to have any possessions because stuff is what people fight over. It divides families. It's why we fight in these wars. It's all these problems. It's at the root of all kinds of evil, as the Apostle Paul said. And so Francis did this radical thing of saying, I'm just going to live a life completely in poverty. In fact, he says he married Lady Poverty. He considered poverty like his pursuit, because he saw what money did and the way it ruined his relationships and got his friends killed and just took over people's lives. Now, we don't have to be as radical as Francis, but he's really challenged me because he had a really good point. And what he did actually sparked such a change in Europe that they say it probably delayed the Protestant Reformation by about 100 years because the church got so reformed by Francis and his followers. It didn't quite stick, and so there was more need of reformation, but Francis was kind of like the pre-Reformation reformer. And people started following him, and they said, what should I do to follow you? And he said, well, what does it say in the Bible? Like Jesus told people, like, sell everything and give it to the poor and then come follow me. And so Francis just basically decided, okay, what if I was just totally literal and I took everything Jesus said about money, and I did it literally, and we give everything away to the poor, and then, you know, we the birds of the air and the, flowers. We just let God provide for us. He's our Father. He'll provide. And he lived like that, and he taught his people to live like that, and it started an incredible revolution. Now, again, I'm not saying you all need to become Franciscans. But long before Francis said any of this stuff, Jesus said it. And he said this. In fact, Jesus said this. He says, watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for life does not consist in the abundance of your possessions. See, Jesus came that we could have abundant life. He said that. But that abundant life doesn't consist in the abundance of stuff. Actually, the abundance of stuff may actually be taking away from your abundant life that God wants you to have because you have too much stuff. And I'm not just talking to those of you that have really nice stuff. It's like we all got stuff. Like I got boxes of stuff that I don't even know what it is in my garage. I got a box of stuff that, I got this box of all of these cables and chargers from every electronic device, and I don't know what they go to, but I don't want to get rid of them because I know as soon as I get rid of them, I'm going to need it that next day. How many of you have ever gotten rid of something and then you think, I'm going to need it the next day? So we hold on to it. We hold on to it because of that. We hold on to it because it's nostalgic, or it was my mom's, or it was this. But that stuff begins to clutter our lives, and it fills up space, and it takes up energy. And when Tracy cleans out the garage once a month, she could be doing something else like washing my car instead. If only we didn't have all that stuff that kept messing up the garage, right? You can have time for the things that you want if you cut out some other things. There's been actually a whole bunch of books that have come out in the last couple of years about this idea of essentialism and of minimalism. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, the minimalism movie on Netflix. And these guys decide they're going to just live these minimal lives. Tracy watched it, and then she just threw away bags and bags worth of my stuff. It was awesome. And basically, it was all the stuff in the kitchen that I use because I cook, right? And then she's like, oh, we didn't need that. We never used it. I'm like, I used it. So negotiate it. Figure it out how you guys do it together. But here's the thing. We don't need all that stuff, and we don't need more places to put our stuff, not because it's bad to have stuff, and not because there's something wrong with having the things around you, but because you can actually, you become enslaved to them. And it's hurting you. It's dragging us down because we have to move it, insure it, all of that. And so I want to actually read to you the context of this passage that verse was in. And this is what Jesus said. And I just want you to listen to what Jesus said. I'm going to ask you a couple sets of questions about it, and then I want to give you a couple practical things. But basically, the way that thing started was some guy came up to Jesus and said, hey, Master, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. I know several people in our church that have had family splits over inheritance, over stuff, right? This is a common thing, and it was common in Jesus' day. It was common in Francis's day. Money and property become something we fight over. And Jesus replied to the guy, he said, man, who appointed me judge or arbiter between you? And then he said to them, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. And when he says all kinds of greed, not just greed for money, think about all of the things that get us into trouble in life. It's not just money, it's sex. Lust is greed for sex or for using some other person. For food, gluttony is greed in relationship to food. It's if one is good, two is better, right? I learned that the hard way. I was 10 years old, and for the first time I went and had lobster. It was amazing. And it was all-you-can-eat lobster, and I had all this butter that you could dip it in, and it was so good. Because really, lobster is just bug meat, but you put butter on it, right? And it's really good. You put butter on it, and I just ate so much lobster, and I was so full, but then they brought the dessert menu, and they had cheesecake. And it's my favorite cheesecake. Oh, I love cheesecake. And so I had cheesecake, and then it was so good that one was good, and I thought, man, two is better because more is better. And so I talked my mom, I don't know how I did it, into getting me another cheesecake. I think she did it just to shut me up. I ate the other cheesecake. I started to feel sick. I went to the bathroom. As I was headed to the bathroom, I vomited all down the hallway of the restaurant, all over the place. It's humiliating. I learned more is not necessarily better. Sometimes less is more. That's a tangent, but let me get back here. And so after Jesus says this, he tells a parable, and he says this. He says, he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. And he thought to himself, what should I do? I have no place to store my crops. You know, he had abundance, but he's like, oh, I got too much. Then he said, well, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Or I'll rent a storage unit. And there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool. This very night your life will be demanded of you, and then who's going to get what you prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. I don't think Jesus is saying, oh, God's going to kill him because he did that. I think he's saying, when you store stuff up and then you die, you can't take it with you, right? It's that whole no luggage racks on a hearse, right? And then Jesus said to his disciples, therefore, because that's the way things work, I tell you, don't worry about your life, what you will eat, or your body, what you will wear, for life is more than food, and the body's more than clothes. Consider the ravens. They don't sow or reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. How much more valuable are you than the birds? And who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to your life? Since you can't do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? And see, the people Jesus is talking to in this story are peasants from like the middle of nowhere that aren't like the people that have lots of stuff. I mean, this wasn't just, 50 years ago when we had a 3 times smaller house. These people didn't have a lot. Like, these are the same people that he said, hey, if you got 2 coats, give one to somebody else. How many of you people have more than 2 coats? Anybody? All right, I do. I probably have 12 coats. Probably more, I don't know. I'd be embarrassed to count how many coats I have. But Jesus is saying this, and he's saying, basically, it's about trusting God, because part of the reason why we hoard stuff, and I know that's kind of not a very nice word for it, but part of the reason why we hold on to our stuff is we're afraid we're going to need it. We're afraid that, we're going to run out. And there's this scarcity mentality, if I don't hold on to it, I'm not going to have enough. And so sometimes we feel like we can't give something away, or we can't get rid of something, or whatever, because we want to have it for a rainy day. And what Jesus is saying here, and what Francis really radically put into practice 800 years ago, is what if we just trusted God like he was our Father and like he's going to take care of us like he said he would, and we didn't feel the need to have to always store up for ourselves, but if we had extra, we give it to other people or we give it away. I seriously remember, my kids, and this is embarrassing, but Luke was born generous, and he just loved to give people stuff. And he wanted to give some of his toys away to his friends, and I'm like, I paid a lot of money for that. It's like, I want him to have it. I'm like, oh, yeah, but then I'm going to have to buy it again next time you want it, right? And I think sometimes we actually teach our kids not to be generous because we want them to hold on to their stuff. He says, consider how the flowers grow. They don't labor or spin, yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all of his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that's how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, how much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? And don't set your heart on what you'll eat or drink, and don't worry about it. For the pagan world runs after all these things, but your Father knows you need them. Seek first his kingdom, and all these things will be given to you as well. It's not saying that these things are bad or that you can't have them. He's just saying don't chase after that stuff because it becomes your master. If you seek first God's kingdom, like God will take care of the stuff. And it's okay. He provides for what we need. And then he concludes it this way. He says, don't be afraid, little flock, for your Father, again, your Father is pleased to give you the kingdom. Like, he likes it. So sell your possessions and give to the poor. Provide purses for yourselves that won't wear out, treasure in heaven that'll never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. See, that's one of the hard things about stuff is the more stuff you have, the more it gets ruined, and then you're bummed because where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. That's why it comes down to these two questions, these two sets of questions that I want you to ask yourself. And I'll give them to you so you can kind of take it home. You can chew on it. If you want to take a picture, write them down. But think about these two questions, these two sets of questions. Here's the first one. What brings life? See, I'm not down on having any stuff. I just want the stuff you have to bring you joy. I want the stuff that we have. I think Jesus wants the stuff that we have and the things that we do in our lives to bring us joy. So what brings you joy? Like, what do you love? What makes you happy? Now, I'm not saying happiness is the end-all, be-all of life, but I love my kids and I want them to be happy. When my kids are doing stuff that brings them joy, I love that. When I got them, toys, I usually get them too many at Christmas, and then, they're overwhelmed by having too many, and so they don't really know what to do. But when you just have one, a thing that you really love, I love watching them enjoy the thing that they love. But sometimes all that other stuff kind of keeps us from enjoying the one thing we love. It's kind of like Cheesecake Factory. Have any of you ever been to Cheesecake Factory? All right. Now, I got nothing against Cheesecake Factory. I love cheesecake, right? So, but that menu, it's like 4,000 pages, right? I don't go there because it's too many choices. I can't do it. I can't. I just sit there all day. I'll sit there and just look, and I'll never make a decision. If I go to In-N-Out, I know what I want. It's easy, right? Part of the problem of having stuff in abundance is it actually paralyzes you in your life. There's actually a term for this. Somebody was telling me about it after the first service. It's called the paradox of choice. That the more choices you give somebody, it'll paralyze them into indecision because they've got too many choices. It's why Steve Jobs, have you ever noticed Steve Jobs was always wearing the same thing? He's like black turtleneck, blue jeans. It's his uniform. He chose specifically, a very smart guy, to not waste his brain space on picking what to wear every day. So he just got one outfit, and he's like, that's what my uniform is. And he wore it every day. It wasn't the same one. He probably had a few, clean ones or whatever. But think about how many of you guys have ever had your wife go into a closet that is so full you can't even walk into your walk-in closet, and then she comes out and after an hour is like, I have nothing to wear. Why? Because you have nothing to wear, or because you've got too many choices and you don't like any of them. You're paralyzed by the indecision. So actually, less is more, because when we limit our choices, when we limit some of these non-essential things that aren't a big deal in our life, we have room for what really matters. It's not less is more because we should all be like St. Francis and be in poverty. It's less is more because sometimes the many things take the place of what's really best. I had to do this in terms of my life. I'll show you an example. Well, let me get to the next part. So what brings life? If there's something that brings you life and you love it, keep it. Get the one outfit in your closet that you like and just wear it every day. Or go buy another one of it or a couple more, whatever. You don't have to do that, but the idea is simplify. And if it brings you life, keep it. If it steals life, cut it. This is with your time. This is with your schedule. If you lay out your calendar and you're like, here's all these things that I hate to do and I dread it so much. Do you realize you're doing stuff that you dread? Quit it. Who's in charge of you anyway? Why are you doing stuff that you dread? Who's your master? God's given you the ability to make choice, and the fruit of the Spirit is self-control. If you're doing stuff that you hate, quit it. It's your own fault. Same thing, if you've got a bunch of stuff that you hate or that's in your way, like get rid of it. It's taking up space, it's robbing you of life. And the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but Jesus came that we'd have life and have it to the full. All of the instruction he gives us about, these kind of things is not, like sometimes we write it off as, oh, it's naive, or I could never do that, or whatever. Like, it's to give you life, it's to give you freedom, it's to give you the freedom. He says that the Son has come to set people free. But some of us aren't free because we've got stuff and we've got things and we've got like even people in your life or activities in your life that they're not what you want. That's what this idea of this book I read by Greg McKeown called Essentialism is all about. He says, what are the essential things? He says many businesses, and they learned this basically when Jim Collins did his good to great study, and what takes businesses from just good to great. They did a follow-up study, and they found out that great businesses become, less good or less great because basically once they're great, they have lots of options. They have lots of stuff that they can do. They're good at a lot of stuff. They can do a lot of things well, but they stop focusing on that one or two things that they were made to do. That's the essential of what their business is about. And so they just divide their energies on everything else. It's the same thing with your stuff, with your life, with what you do with your life. What are the things that you love, that you're called to, that you're made for? What are the things you have that are just like you love them? Keep them. Get rid of everything else. So that's first set of questions. Second set of questions is this: where's your heart? That passage said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. It's just a fact of life that where you put your money, your heart goes. Or where you put what you value, that's where your heart is. Like, I learned this when I leased a car. 2007, I leased an Audi A4, like lowest end Audi, but I was stoked because I never had a new car. I wanted a nice car. I got the car for a lease. I know Dave Ramsey says never to do that. I learned the hard way. I have to learn things the hard way, right? So I did this lease, and as soon as I got the car, I just became a jerk. Because my kids were just messy, and they'd get in my car and they would be on the way to school and I'd have to take them to school and they were still eating, and I'm like, you can't eat in my car. And then they'd do it anyway, and there'd be crumbs, and I'd be like, oh my gosh. And then they'd kick the back of the seat, and the seat is just cheap plastic because it was like the low-end A4 thing. And so it broke off. And I'm ticked at my kids because I'm worried about this car, especially because it's a lease, and I'm going to have to take it back, and they're going to ding me for every little thing wrong with it, right? But it was just a way of bringing home to me that, oh my gosh, where your treasure is, there your heart will be. My treasure is my kids. My heart should be with them. But here I am. I've put money into a car, and now I'm putting my value, my thing there, and I'm trading my kids for just a thing. I think in some ways we do those kind of things. This is all confessional, right? I love getting to be the preacher because I have to learn stuff with you. And I got to preach to myself at least as much as I preach to you, and I got to practice what I preach because you'll know otherwise. God will know. I'll know. So the next question is, where's your heart? Part of the reason that my heart is with the ministry that Nadal is doing over in Jordan is because I've been there. I've met these people. I love these people. My heart's with them. I've invested money, I've invested time, I've invested resource with them, and my heart's with them. We're connected. What are you connected to? Where is your heart? Where's your attention? Where's your value? If it's not where you want it to be, then just redirect your money, and it will help you redirect your heart. Part of the reason, we give to the church, part of the reason some of you are so invested in the church is you've given a lot to the church, and you've given even to the building fund that we're doing. It makes you invested in it in just a different way because your heart's in it. It's not just, money. It's not just stuff. Where's your heart, and where do you want it to be? So I need a volunteer for this next part. Can I get a volunteer? Somebody come up and help me? Yep, come on up. Great. Give him a hand. I'll give you a hand up. All right. So here's the thing. I want you to, have this. So I was thinking about the idea of what we hold on to and thinking about, how much we gather stuff and what it does for our life. It's good. And as I'm thinking of this idea of what we have, because each of you has stuff that you're juggling in your life, right? You each have stuff in your hands. And sometimes we are not ready for what comes our way because we've got our hands full already. I was thinking about this in terms of capacity. I had somebody that showed me this a little over a year ago because, some of us are so stretched to capacity financially, emotionally, with our schedule, with the amount of things we're attempting to do, that we just don't have room in our life for anything more. And so sometimes what happens is God comes along with blessing, and God wants to bless us, and he wants to give us stuff. But because we're just trying to juggle it and hold on to it all, we're dropping balls all over the place. I mean, what if, I want you to catch as many of these as you can, right? Okay. What if God were to just pour out blessing on our heart, on our life? All right, everybody, give me a hand. You can go. No, you can leave it. I'll get it later. What if God is going to pour blessing out on your life and you just don't have capacity for it because you got too much that you're holding on to? I think we do this with our stuff. We do it with our time, with our schedules. We have all of these things that we've already said yes to. Things that may be nice, but they're not really the things that we care about. They're not the most important things. How can we have less of what we don't need so that we can create more of what we do need? How can we create opportunity to have what really matters to us? It's going to take saying no. And this is where I'll give you just a couple of quick, tips or challenges. And these are things that I'm doing and things that I'm just going to challenge you to do. And one, there's just two things. One is to, I'll remember them. One is to cut back on your consumption, and the second one is to clear out your congestion. So we'll talk about that. So cut back on consumption. Like the reality is, as Americans, we consume more than our share of the resources of the world. We just do, because we can. And sometimes just because it's free or just because you can get it on sale or whatever, it doesn't mean you need it. And some of the problems of the world, we all know about, how our clothes are made by slaves and all these kind of different things that we hear about, and you feel guilty and you don't know what to do, and it's like, you'd probably never do anything if you could do everything right for every documentary that you ever watched. But what if you just consumed less? I mean, all of us could probably consume a little less food, a little less alcohol. Some of us. But what if we cut back? What if we cut back? What if we decided, do I really need this? What if we just cut back? And then the second thing is to clear out all the congestion. So much of our stuff is taking up space in your schedule, in your life, and the things that you have bills for or subscriptions to or whatever. Maybe it's a good time to do a spring cleaning and an evaluation of your budget, your life, your schedule, your garage, storage unit, whatever, and just clear some of that stuff out. Not because it's bad, but because it's holding you back. It's not giving you life. Jesus came to give us life and life to the full, and sometimes those things just fill up our life, and it masquerades as or keeps us from having the full life that Jesus really wants to give us. Because we're so busy juggling so much stuff that we're not ready for it. So that's my challenge for you. I'm doing it myself. I've got a garage that I told you my wife keeps cleaning out. Now I've got to go through it, and I got to just throw stuff away. I'm going to clear stuff out. I'm just on a mission to get rid of stuff. So if you want stuff, just come to me. I'll give you lots of stuff. But we're also going to do something as a church. We're gonna have a rummage sale to help raise money for the building. A big rummage sale and a flea market at the new facility, and we're going to gather that. We haven't got a date yet for it, but if you want to start cleaning out and get rid of the crap and keep the good stuff to help us to sell, and then we can give that for the building fund, and it'll be a way of us to be a part of that together. But listen, less is more. In fact, there's this last verse I want to leave you with, and if you memorize a verse, this would be a good one. The richest man who ever lived in history, King Solomon, said this, better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. See, for me, when I saw somebody do this thing with the balls like a year ago, I realized that my capacity was stretched. I was stretched to capacity financially and in my just life, my schedule. And I had to give up my wedding business to just set that aside to go, like, I love doing weddings, and I still have some on my calendar, but I gave up the business and gave it away because I just don't have the capacity. I don't have, it was maxing out my capacity so that I didn't have the margin for when crisis came or when God poured out blessing in my life to be able to respond to what he was doing. And so I had to make some choices. And I'm like, I like the money. I like doing the work. But it's like something I got to lay down because better is one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. And I know, there are some of you that may be working really hard. I know that sometimes people have this kind of thing of, oh, I'm working toward this retirement goal, or I'm working toward this, or, my dad was always working toward financial freedom, that he never got. And, I see people that work, but they don't enjoy their life in the middle because it's always that, someday. And better is one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. We're going to have to be people that set a limit on our consumption and just say, at some point, enough is enough. At some point, this is how much I need, and other I can give away, and I don't have to let it hold me because I can own it and master it rather than it mastering me. So why don't you stand up with me, and I'm going to pray for you. And my challenge is to cut back and to clear out. So, God, I thank you for these people. I thank you for our church. I thank you for this family. I thank you for your word that speaks to very practical issues in our life, and that you want life for us, that you want freedom for us. You don't want to keep us from things. You just want us to be focused on the right things. And so, God, I pray that you would give us the discipline and the courage to clear out and to cut back, to clear the things out of our life that are just taking up space, and to cut back on our consumption so that we have more to give, more to share, more to invest in things that we really love. And so, God, I thank you. I pray for your blessing and for your continued guidance for all your people. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. God bless you. Have a great day.